It's a little past 11 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and get this thing kicked off and started. So good morning, everybody. Appreciate you joining the call today, the webinar today. Welcome to our monthly series. We meet with different government experts each month and do a lot of training events. So if you're not following our events, please do and make sure you attend. We do not charge for any of these. Our mission is to bring the true information straight from the source to all of you to help you grow and expand your business with the various agencies. I am truly honored today to have Ms. Darlene Bullock on the call with us. She is the Executive Director of the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization at the Department of Homeland Security. So today is our opportunity to learn all things Homeland Security, how to do business, and ask as many questions as you want. We'll try to get through all of those questions towards the end of the webinar. Please post all questions in the Q&A box. I am not looking at the chat box at all. So if you post questions in the chat box, I will not see them. Please make sure that you post your questions in the Q&A box. Today's webinar is being recorded. It will be posted and a link will be sent out to all registrants so that you can view the webinar and go back and refer to it at leisure. You don't have to take copious notes while Ms. Bullock is talking. So with that, again, welcome to our monthly webinar. Quick introduction about myself. I'm Reena Bhatia. I'm the CEO of ProposalHelper and BidExecs. We provide BD and proposal solutions to companies. We've been in business for 14 years. Personally, I've been in the industry for about 30 years now. And what I hold in common, I see with Ms. Bullock, is we are both alumni of the University of Maryland, College Park. So I'm not going to dwell too much on myself. I'm going to move over and please ask Ms. Bullock, who is suffering from a little bit of a sore throat, and I appreciate her still pushing through and being on our webinar today. But Ms. Bullock, if you'd please come on, introduce yourself. In the meantime, I'll bring up your slides so we can get started with today's content.
Thank you. I hope everyone can hear me. I may sound like I smoked a pack of cigarettes, but I do not smoke. I've been sick all weekend. I don't know. It must be something going around. So please excuse my voice. But I didn't want to miss it. I hate missing events to, provide information about what we do at Homeland. And so I had to make sure that was here. So sound a little deeper than normal, but sorry about that. And thanks for the introduction, Rena. I appreciate that. But yes, go Terps. We didn't fare too well in football the last couple times. But hopefully basketball season will be better. But just a little bit about me. I am Darlene Bullock. I am the executive director of the OSDBU for DHS. So that's the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization. I was a contracting officer for many, 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 many years. So I think the combination of me being a contracting officer by heart and by training and being the OSDBU for the last 5 years. I was a deputy before that. I've done some very high level small business awards, particularly at DHS. So, I'm in tune to I used to work for the commercial side too. I used to work for SEIC. It was a quick blip in my career. So I work for local government, federal government, commercial. So a little bit of everything. But my heart is with public service. And so this is why I made sure I, came back to the federal space. But I guess we can get started. It's a lot of slides. It's a lot of information. I'm not going to go over all the slides. But some of these are for you to have the information. Information is power. And so just to make sure that you know about Homeland Security. And we are dedicated to small business. If you know anything about DHS's walk with small business and the scorecard, and I'll go over a little bit of that later. And what you should be doing if for agencies who are not meeting the scorecard grades or their goals, some advice about that. But what we'll cover today. So a little bit about what's the OSDBU. this acronym of what it is, people get, a little turned around about. They call it all kind of things. But I'll talk a little about what the OSDBU is. I'll talk about DHS mission components and the offices. What do we buy? What do all these components buy at DHS from all these offices to support the homeland? What do we do? Steps to doing business. Many of these you already know about. I won't go. I think this is a pretty good mature group of contractors here or GovCon people. A little bit about diversity, equity, and inclusion and procurement. And I'll talk a little bit about some of my insights and initiatives, and some of it is unknown right now in a lot of the space because of the recent election. But we will be supporting small business as much as we can, and supporting the administration and moving forward uh, throughout next 4 years. So next slide, what is the OSDBU? So the OSDBU is the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization. Now, what do we do? Now, every agency that has procurement power has an OSDBU. So there's one of me in every organization. Now, in NASA and the Department of Defense, they're called the Office of Small Business Programs, but it's the same thing. We have the same duties. And so what is it that we do? I manage a small business program for the entire Homeland Security. We'll talk about a little bit about what DHS spend is, et cetera. I assist with equity and procurement. What does that mean? Well, part of it is maximizing the use of small businesses, underserved groups, women, service disabled groups, companies that are in hub zones, uh, you know, historically underutilized business zones, veterans. So we want to make sure that we are equitable in the contracts that are received by each one of those groups. And again, I have a lot of slides about equity. We'll talk about that a little bit, but equity does not mean taking from someone else. It means being fair in the way we conduct business. We do a lot of training. I do a lot of these internal training to my acquisition professionals at DHS, and I do a lot of training and outreach to companies such as yourself, groups such as Marina has, a lot of associations, etc. We do a lot of that. One of the biggest things that we are advocates. So when you say, well, Don, what does that mean really? It's different ways. If you're a small business, you're not getting paid, you need to call us. If you're a small business and you feel that a solicitation or an RFI you're responding to is unduly restrictive, you need to call the OSDBU. If you're having trouble reaching a contracting officer or anything, we are the advocates for small business. So that just does not mean outreach and going to events. We do a lot of different things. I have a lot of regulatory things I have to do, a lot of everything. So if you can imagine running a program for, $26 billion contract spend, that's not the DHS budget, of course. That's how much we spend in eligible dollars for contracts. It's a heavy lift. And I'll talk about our office size and those things later. The next 3 bullets, if you want to look at a small video about inside the OSDBU, we did that a few years ago. You can look at that. It's on YouTube. We just launched a new website. This is our first public-facing website that's kind of put together. We have pieces all over the place. And I'm like, no, I need an OSDBU public-facing site. So that is the site you can go in and find all things about small business. We do take suggestions. Like if you say, well, Donna, we should have a little more about X, Y, and Z on here. Hey, send us a message and we can look into that to make, the website is for you. It's also for procurement people within DHS, but it's also for the community. So small business community, large businesses, whoever wants to find more about DHS. If there's something missing there, let me know. And we'll try to make that fix that. We went live, I believe it was April of this year, 2024. The website went live. And we also have the DHS mailbox. Again, if you have any comments, questions, that's our generic mailbox. You can get to us there. Next slide. And you can go, I'll just go over the mission components and some of the offices. So what I'll kind of cover here is the mission of DHS. The mission of DHS is to protect the homeland and the visitors that come to this country. Our mission is to safeguard the American people. DHS has many, many different missions, right? So, and we'll talk about that in some of the slides, but DHS was formed because of the terrorist attack, September 11th. DHS began operations on March 1st, 2003. So we're a very young agency with very old parts. That's what I'll say. So, the Coast Guard's been around forever. Uh, Customs and Border Protection's been around forever, but bringing those into one agency was a heavy lift. The Secretary Mayorkas leads DHS with over 260,000 employees worldwide. We are the second largest employer, I believe, third largest after the VA. I'm sorry. We're the fifth largest spender in the federal space, but we're third largest employer. And we have many, many missions. And so we'll talk about that. We do everything from land, sea, air, and cyber. So we're in a constant state of work, a constant state of making sure that this United States is safe. Next slide. So this gives you a little slide about the relationship of DHS. So as the OSDBU, I'm in the yellow box. And so I report to the Deputy Secretary of the Department. So that is how the OSDBU office is seen in every agency. You may see some agencies where that position may not report directly to, but they are supposedly by law if the person is in the senior executive service as well as the chief procurement officer. So I have a dotted line to the chief procurement officer. Our chief procurement officer is Paul Courtney. The deputy chief procurement officer is Nina Ferraro. So I work with them in small business goaling. Of course, small business is a part of what they have to make sure that they also do. But I report to the deputy secretary based on the law. And so my dotted line to them is our collaboration, my funding for my office comes from them, et cetera. And at the bottom in those blue boxes, you see the heads of the contracting activity. Now, what are those? Those are the individuals that are in charge of the procurements or acquisition in those different components. So if you're interested in ICE, Al Dayton. If you're interested in CBP, that's Earl Lewis. So I wanted to provide you that information when you're wondering who is the person that's in charge of procurement and acquisition for a certain component. That's the person. Next slide. Now, this is my organizational chart within the OSDBU. So the OSDBU, again, the dotted line to the CPO. I report to the deputy secretary. I have a deputy, and we have 8 individuals that work in the OSDBU proper. So there's 10 of us in the OSDBU to tackle this, $26 billion procurement. There are some OSDBU offices that are bigger, like the VA. There's some that are a lot smaller, like Social Security. I think it's 1 person or 2. How do you do your job with 1 or 2 people? Smaller budget, but some of the same regulatory things that I have to do, that agency has to do. So OSDBUs are set up quite differently in each agency. A lot of attention was paid more to how those offices were set up. In the last couple of executive orders that President Biden issued to make that OSDBU position more visible and to make sure that small businesses, had a voice. So next slide. So now we'll talk a little bit about some of the components, is what we call them. Those are some of the components. They are what make up Homeland Security. I won't go into all of them. I think there's a link on one of the previous slides where I talk about mission, where you can see all the offices, the specific offices. There are a lot. There are a lot of offices that, when DHS was formed, came together from other agencies to form DHS. So some of these are components, some of these are buying activities. So I just want to let you know, just so you can see, the buying activity is often the component itself, but sometimes it's not. It can get confusing. A great example is Office of Procurement Operations. That's also called, I used to work in this office, and this, when I was a contracting officer, and this office is also called DHS Headquarters Procurement. So out of this office comes a lot of different procurements. Science and technology, Federal Protective Service, all of the chief XO offices, the Chief Information Office, Chief Human Capital, if your company has an interest in that, come out of OPO. While OPO is not a component, they support the Office of the Secretary. They support many, many different offices within DHS. So while they're not a component, they support many of the different offices at the secretary or the headquarters level. And I think the next slide shows what their spend is. Next slide. So the slides will show you points of contact. And when you see that IL, DHS has an industry liaison program. And what is that? The industry liaisons are the individuals who interact with industry, mostly large business. If it's a small business, they usually hand that off to the OSDBU office. But sometimes we're in meetings with large businesses too, because large businesses are responsible for a lot of subcontracting. So we do have interaction with them. So what does OPO buy? So you saw the customers on the first page, the previous page. These are some of the things that they buy. This is just a sample of the things that the Office of Procurement Operation purchases. So the industry liaison is if you're a large business or you are interested in attending. We have these things called strategic industry conversations. We have reverse industry days. The component, the industry liaison office who puts those on. We attend those, but that is who puts those on. The small business specialist, there's a generic mailbox for the OPO small business specialist. Also, if you go to our website, www.dhs.gov/OSDBU, there's a list of all the small business specialists by name in each component. So while you saw the 10, the 10 individuals that make up the OSDBU, there are also small business specialists in each one of these components, right? Or buying activities. So OPO is a buying activity. They're not a component. They have a small business specialist function. And these are some of the things that OPO purchases. Next slide. CISA. CISA is the cybersecurity agency for the federal government. They manage and mitigate risks to the nation's cyber and physical infrastructure. They understand and manage and reduce the risk to our cyber and physical infrastructure. So CISA buys a lot. While I pull them out as a component, they don't have procurement authority yet. So their purchases are still under Office of Procurement Operations. So if you're interested in CISA, they do have their own small business specialist. I believe that position is vacant right now. But if you have interest in cyber infrastructure and the CISA as an agency itself, you can go to the next slide. Rena, thanks. And you can get more information from there. They have a procurement industry liaison. They have a component program, chief of contracting office, point of contact, and they have a small business specialist. So this is how you can get to CISA if you're interested in cyber. And this is some of the things that they do. They do many other things that CISA purchases and procures. But this is the information if you want to get to CISA. Next slide. Excuse me. Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction Office. They're tasked with countering attempts by terrorists or other threat actions. They use technical expertise and relationships to support DHS components, first responders, as well as domestic and international counterparts to neutralize threats. Their mission is to lead DHS in efforts and coordinate with domestic and international partners to safeguard the United States. So a lot of what they do has to do with chemical and biological and radiological threats. So this is the purpose of this Office of Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction. There's been conversation about this office not continuing. Well, we shall see. We don't know yet, but this is their goal. They used to be called DNDO a long time ago. They changed the name to Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction, so we will see. But next slide. And these are just some of the things that they purchase. Again, a lot of chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear equipment, detection, medical equipment. Again, the points of contact, if you have an interest in CWMD, those are again, this office procurements are purchased through the Office of Procurement Operations, OPO. Next slide. Science and technology, S&T, again, this is an office, a huge office whose procurements are out of the Office of Procurement Operations. So S&T is our research and development arm. They enable effective, efficient, and secure operations across Homeland by applying a lot of scientific and engineering and innovative approaches. This is where our CIBER program comes from. So S&T plays a huge role in making sure that the visitors to the United States and so forth are safe. And so they have a lot of different programs. They're a very good website. I don't think I have it on here, but if you were to just Google S&T, you would see a lot of the things that they do, and they do a lot of things with colleges, a lot of things with historically Black colleges and universities. Again, the research and development arm is there. Commercialization of those CIBER products, phase 3. So the purpose of S&T is, again, to keep us safe and to make sure that, they're communicating a lot of the things that they do through they do the BAAs. They do a lot of let's say, if you have, they have ideas that they want to solve, and they'll come out with RFP that has, I want a company that knows how to make the wind move X, Y, and Z. I'm just making something up. You would respond to that and say, you might have a company that does that. You're an R&D person who has just that solution. That is who you would contact, science and technology. Next slide. No, components, U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Their job is to manage the border, combining customs, immigration, border security, and agriculture protection. I used to work for Legacy Customs years ago, and it's very interesting if a lot of times we think about customs and border protection, we think about, the border itself, individuals crossing the border, but they also do things, and if you ever get a chance to see they used to do these road shows or demos where they would show all these fake products that come into the United States. And some of them are products that, people could take that could, that are not safe with your life and health. And so part of what CBP does is to make sure those products don't get into the country. So they're multidimensional. They're more than just the border. They also have to do with trade and goods that come into this country. Next slide. And so this will show you again, industry liaison, if you have an interest as a large business or, want to find more about some of the outreach the industry liaison does, the small business specialist office. And I will tell you about CBP. If you contact their small business specialist office, CBP has a new program where they have their own database of vendors. So if you want to meet with them, just send them a message. Also, you can see, again, on our website, the individuals who make up the CBP Small Business Office. And then you can, get a little more information about what it is CBP buys, how can you meet with individual offices. Sometimes they have industry days based on a need or NAICS code. So please reach out to CBP. They are probably, if not the biggest spender. That's changed in the last few years in the DHS space, one of the components. And they buy everything. They buy everything from pieces and parts to airplanes to canines to program management services to, drones to everything, uniforms, guard services, etc. Next slide. FEMA. Again, FEMA is, we all know FEMA. FEMA is helps citizens of this country before, during, and after disasters. Again, FEMA is another component that a totally different mission, but ultimately the mission is to keep us safe, right, and protect us when there's a disaster. And so FEMA has many different missions too. Increasing contract spend, particularly with the hurricanes we just had at the end of the fiscal year. They buy a little bit of everything. Remember, FEMA has a lot of pre-positioned contracts. So the contracts that they have in place are ready to turn on as soon as a disaster is declared and they're needed in that state. So there's a lot of subcontracting in FEMA. A lot of times the contracts are awarded for many, many years. So it is in place when it's ready. So these contracts are usually IDIQ contracts with multiple vendors that are competed at the time that there's a disaster and there needs to be a immediate response. Okay. So again, information about FEMA. FEMA is another one that has their own database. They have their own website about how to be a support in a disaster. If this is an area that you want to support FEMA, and you can reach out to their small business specialists. Their small business specialists are particularly interesting because they used to be program people. So they're very knowledgeable about FEMA inside and out, how FEMA works. So if FEMA is an interest to you, those are two individuals, Danny Keegan and Amy Conley. Their information is on our website, who are very knowledgeable about the purpose of FEMA and the many programs they have. Next slide. USCIS, they're oversee legal, lawful immigration to the United States. USCIS is funded by the applications for citizenship. So when, a few years ago, when, there was a stoppage of individuals coming to the United States, they almost had to be furloughed because they don't get funding if those applications do not exist. Next slide. Some things that FEMA does, USCIS does purchase a lot of program management, a lot of IT procurement at USCIS. Again, they have the component industry liaison, and these are two of their small business specialists, very responsive small business specialists that work at USCIS. Next slide. U.S. Secret Service. Excuse me. Now, the Secret Service has two missions. A lot of people think, oh, they're just guarding individuals who come to the United States. They guard the president, the vice president, and dignitaries. But they also safeguard the payment and financial systems of the United States. They do not have a big budget at the U.S. Secret Service, but they have their mission. They have a huge mission to make sure that those individuals, including the president and the vice president, are protected. The next slide, and you can see what it is that U.S. Secret Service purchases. They're very small business friendly at U.S. Secret Service. There's some things that can't be purchased because just of the nature of what they do through a small business, but a lot of things can be. So they usually meet their small business goals. So you can see the contract spend is not huge, average spend. Information to reach out to them. The next slide. FLETC is the smallest of the spending agencies, and this is where the federal officers go to get trained. There are several locations, like in Glencoe, Georgia, Cheltenham, Maryland. You can see what they do. They buy a lot of uniforms, a lot of classroom activity. Next slide. So they are the ones who train federal law enforcement officers. They buy a lot of ammunition, guard service, etc. So if you have the smallest spender again, if you want to reach out to FLETC, small business specialist, you can through here. Next slide. ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. ICE is a law enforcement organization all across the United States. They buy many, many things, detention centers. I have a program called ICE Air, which transports detainees. I will say, I'll just real quick, I had watched and I'll tell you about the Coast Guard and ICE. A few weeks ago, I was watching a 60 Minutes story, and a really good snippet about or story about ICE and their duties and what they do and the costs and so forth. I thought it was very interesting. So if you get a chance to watch that, the 60 Minutes episode, maybe about 2 or 3 weeks ago, it was very enlightening. Even though I know this, but it's enlightening for the public to understand how much it costs to enforce immigration and detainees and feed and house, and it's quite expensive to do that. These are some of the things that they ICE at a glance. Next slide. Some of the things that ICE buys: a lot of language interpreter services, of course, a lot of food and clothing, guard services, temporary housing, detention center facilities is the part of that. Ammunition. Again, they're a law enforcement organization. And this is the information for ICE. We don't know. We expect that spend to probably increase over the next several years. So next slide. TSA, everyone goes to the airport, go on vacation, go on travel for work. TSA is airport security is their mission. They do not operate the airports. So TSA, when you come in to the airport, those are run by the municipality of that area, state, or jurisdiction. TSA only supports the moving through to be scanned and security of cargo and individuals coming through those coming through the airport. They do not run the airports. Next slide. A little bit what TSA buys: advanced technology, X-ray equipment. That's one area where small businesses, we wish they could compete in that area. We've tried many things, but that's one area where we have to buy a lot of items from large businesses, is the equipment that you go through to be scanned. But they buy a host of a lot of things, a lot of program management, etc. And so that's the information for the small business specialist. Again, they also have a component industry liaison. Next slide. Excuse me. U.S. Coast Guard. Again, Coast Guard has many, many missions, from drug interdiction, ice breaking. They do many things. They're also, in time of war, they become part of the Department of Defense. Their mission is to provide defense operations and readiness, as well as maritime law enforcement. They rescue people, on the sea. I had a chance to see that. I was on a cruise ship one time, and the gentleman got sick, unfortunately. They told us we'll have to stop because they have to take him off the ship. It's a big cruise ship. Coast Guard came in. It was like watching something from a movie. He came in, came down and got him. This is in the middle of the ocean in a helicopter, pulled him back up and just whisked away. Like it was amazing. It made me very proud to work for Department of Homeland Security and to support the U.S. Coast Guard. So next slide. A little bit about what they buy. They buy a lot of aircraft maintenance equipment. They do a lot of construction contracts at the Coast Guard. In fact, they have awarded DHS-wide construction contracts that all of Homeland uses. A lot of shipbuilding and repair. Next slide. Now, real quick, and I won't go over this. This is just DHS spend. You can go to the next slide, Rena, for time. And then I won't go over these, but I just want you to know what DHS has done as far as our small business achievement. So DHS, last fiscal year, we don't have the numbers for 24 yet. We won't have those until probably April or May of 2025. It's always a year behind. So the final numbers, it'll show you what DHS goals were and how much we spent on small business. About $10 billion almost in small business obligations, $4.7 billion to small disadvantaged business. Some of the highest numbers we've ever done were for fiscal year 2023. Next slide. Yeah, and you can go through that. We're all green. You can look at those later. I don't want to get to the other slides. You can 24. This is where we believe we're going to end up in 2024. Again, until the federal procurement data system shuts down in February, March. We don't know if these will be the final numbers, but will be all green at DHS. Next slide. And this I want to take you real quick. DHS has small business goals at the DHS level. Now, every agency doesn't do this, but DHS does. Then we set goals for each component. So Coast Guard has its own goal, which differs from TSA. They have different missions, right? USCIS has a different goal than Secret Service. And so these are the goals for 2024. We have not given the goals for 2025 because the DHS goals are still in discussion with SBA. And we just don't know how that will affect with new administration coming, if those goals will remain the same. But I just want you to know that every component has a different goal. And that may help you when you're like, oh, okay, has TSA reached some of their goals in certain areas? Or where are they lacking? Are they lacking in hub zone? Are they lacking in companies doing work with small disadvantaged business? Do they do work with women? And as you can see, most all met their women-owned small business goal, the service disabled goal. So we do really well. Small disadvantaged businesses where it was a challenge last year for some of the components to meet those goals. But as an agency, we exceeded the small disadvantaged business goal. Next slide. 2025 again, we do not have the goals yet. We're still negotiating with SBA. I will say, unless something changes, the small disadvantaged business goal for the government is now 15%. That is the goal that President Biden wanted by 2025. That currently is the goal, unless that remains the same or changed. And then that goal has to be, agencies have to try to help meet the 15% across the space. So if this stands, every agency that you may deal with, their small disadvantaged business goal is going up a lot higher. And what does that mean? That probably means a lot more socioeconomic set-asides, a lot of use of the 8A program to try to meet the goal, okay? And to make more opportunities for small disadvantaged businesses. The next slide. You can go past that one since we don't have those numbers yet. Just a little bit about DHS, our track record with small business. And if you want to see everything from 2014 to 2023, you can click on that link. And you can see what we've done and the spin each one of these small business categories. Okay, next slide. Steps to doing business with DHS. Next slide. Some of this you already know. I did want to give you what our top NAICS codes are, the top 5 NAICS codes. Believe it or not, like security guard and patrol service is probably our number 2 NAICS code in the department. Federal Protective Service is one of our, the Office of Procurement Operations. Remember, they have a lot of different customers. The procurements for the Federal Protective Service come out of OPO. Now, the Federal Protective Service is charged with the policing or for government buildings. And so while DHS is in charge of that, you may see Federal Protective Service officers at Social Security Administration, at the Department of Agriculture. So this is what we are staffed to do. There are a lot of contractors. Of course, they don't have the government staff to do that. It's a lot of contract dollars that go into guard services. A lot of administrative and management and general consulting services. A lot of computer services. Construction is one of our largest NAICS codes. Next slide. Being procurement ready, you all know this as, what does that mean? So this is a slide I just have in here. Some people ask me, what does that mean? It means you have to be ready. DHS, when you come to see us or a small business specialist, we don't help you create proposals. We don't help do those things. If there's something in an RFP that doesn't seem right, yes, we are advocates to try to say, well, why is that necessary to the contracting people? But we don't help to make your company procurement ready. We try to give you as much information as possible for you to understand the requirement and understand how DHS works, but we don't do that. So these are some of the groups or offices that we feel like Apex Accelerators, for example, that can help a company become procurement ready. Next slide. Again, procurement readiness. As mature companies, you know this, but sometimes I have to repeat it. I mean, there's some companies, the website's not right. There's some companies who, as a contracting officer, you may want to meet with me, but then you have HHS in the email. I mean, mistakes happen, but we do read things. So we want you to make sure that you're ready and as small as mistakes as possible. Just read over what you're doing. Proposals, for example, we're in this age of AI. Make sure, you read it, and that is, some of these proposal writers will write the same proposal for each person. Sound exactly the same. We've seen that. We catch it. So we just want to make sure that you're ready for, working with Homeland Security. Attend agency industry days. Suggest industry days. A lot of times, I mean, you got to advocate for yourself a lot. I mean, a lot of times, it's nothing to do a $600 million procurement, no industry day. That's a lot of money. So if you suggested, hey, I think this should be an industry day, or hey, CBP or ICE, can we get a little more about this procurement that's coming up? Ask for that. And we'll, as the OSDBU, will help support that. Review the DHS budget. What is it that DHS is actually purchasing? Some things, sometimes FaceTime is wanted with a component, but they absolutely don't buy what you're selling. So you got to make sure that you're reaching out to the component. That's why I put in there all the things that some of them may buy, which is not inclusive. If you go to their website, you can see a lot of things that they do, and also read the budget. But just to give you a heads up, if you're in disaster assistance, Secret Service is not where you probably want to go. You want to go to FEMA or someone who's doing that type of work. Next slide. Industry liaisons, I talked about those. There's a listing of more information about industry liaisons and the component small business specialist. You can reach out to them. They're specific to components. Sometimes the industry liaison is the same person as a small business specialist. We try to get away from that because it kind of, to me, there's a conflict. But you can reach out to those individuals if you want more information about DHS, a particular component and its mission. Okay, next slide. Doing business with DHS, you all know these things. I'm not going to go over this SAM and all that. You already know that. I just like to put the slide in, particularly 7, understand contract types. What does DHS? We do everything. We use schedules. We have different authorities that we use. But, it's not hard to award a contract. The biggest issue is step 8. You got to perform. You got to provide excellent performance. And so again, there are issues with CPARs. Your CPARs is not being issued as a small business, or what is written is not quite reflect your performance. You think you can get the OSDBU involved in that too. Next slide. Know your audience. I won't go over this. I will talk about, I think I have slides about APFS. That's our forecast system. You'll see a lot of agencies using GSA, which was kind of built off the DHS acquisition planning forecast system. But, again, it's just knowing who your audience is. Don't sell, parts to a certain, you may be a reseller, and maybe Coast Guard is buying those, but FEMA's not doing that. So it might be a waste of time to talk to FEMA if you're a parts person selling. It doesn't make sense. So we want to make sure everyone is using their time wisely. Okay. Next slide. And you'll have all these slides you can see. So our forecast system is, and many of you, if you haven't seen that, this is where we have all of our procurements over 250,000, except for modifications. Exercise options, those type of things are not in there. But often what happens with this is that you may look at APFS and you see, can you go to the next slide, Rena? I think I have a screenshot of. So this is a screenshot about APFS. This is our planning forecast system. You can register. You can have it send you emails about certain NAICS codes that you want to know about when something's issued. Again, this is only planning. So this is not a system where, some of these procurements may say 2025, may not happen until 2026. They may not have the money for it. A lot of them will have how they think they may want to buy it through certain vehicles. That's not the case, right? So when they get the funding, we bought this way last time, or we have kind of an idea, but until the market research is completed, we don't really know. So a lot of companies get upset because, hey, the strategy has changed. Well, sometimes that does happen because the market research at this point is usually not done. This is just telling you what we plan on buying, not really how we plan on buying or what vehicles we plan on using. Next slide. So if you're not an APFS, make sure you register. DHS is a lot of different authorities that we use. We use the schedules. We use best-in-class contracts. We use open market to a degree. Of course, we use the GSA schedules. We have CSOP authority, other transaction authority, CIBR phase 3. We use BPAs, blanket ordering agreements. If you go to the next slide, Rita, I think a little bit about now our other transaction authority is used to procure R&D and prototype projects, and they're not subject to the FAR. Right now, because of the continuing resolution, we do not have OT authority. It's not active. We hopefully will get that. We just don't know yet. We also have an authority called CSOP, and is used to competitively procure innovative commercial items using a faster evaluation process. And if you want more information about CSOP, that's Commercial Solutions Opening Pilot Program Authority. You can look at the CSOP guide. I think we have it. I believe GSA, DOD. Every agency does not have the CSOP authority. Okay. Next slide. R&D, if you're an R&D company, these are some of the pathways to R&D. I talked about a little bit about them, of the broad agency announcement, Silicon Valley Innovative Program, our CIBR program. They do sometimes these prize competitions, etc. Again, all of this is out of S&T, Science and Technology Directorate. So this is just a snapshot. If you're a company, a lot of times in these events, it's a lot of IT companies, but I also want to make sure individuals who build things or have innovative products or are in R&D, that you know what the pathways are also. Okay, next slide. Unsolicited proposals. If you have a great idea, well, it has to be one that's a great idea. I mean, it makes sure it's innovative and it's not just something that someone else thought of. But a lot of times it could be something that someone thought of and you have a different take on it. Like you can bring it to a different level. We do have a link there, but I noticed that we do have to update that link of how to submit an unsolicited proposal, which we will do that. But these are just the steps. If you think you have something that's innovative and unique, and it really truly is, you can submit that, and we are required to review it and give a response. Next slide. Diversity, equity, inclusion. And so, Rena, can you go past some of these slides? The purpose of this, because I want it for time, and I'll just go to our, some of my things, some of the things I'm focusing on. So if you read, the purpose of this is to understand what has happened in the last few years on diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? And some of the executive orders that have been issued by President Biden's administration, federal equity plans. A lot of it is equity, not just in procurement, but also in hiring. A lot of them, made a lot of changes to what the eligible offices should be doing, but having more of a voice in the process. Small business specialists having more of a voice in the process. There's also new entrants and re-entrants. For years, for quite some time, the vendor base has decreased. So we're trying to figure out the best way to increase the vendor base. We lost some vendors during COVID. They are increasing now, but as a whole, the government has lost a lot of small businesses, vendors. We don't know why that is. There are a lot of reasons. Some of it could be best-in-class contracts. Some of it could be, hey, we just don't have the budget to buy those things this year. Some companies get sold and bought. We're not clear on why that is. But just know part of some of these executive orders, the OMB memo, is to tackle and track how many businesses we are losing. Next slide. You can go to the next one. This is just how the SDB goal is increased. Another OMB memo. I just put these here for reference so you can see. Secretary Mayorkas issued a memo about small business inclusion in 2022, making sure that the individuals with the funds, the senior executives in the department, are making sure they're being inclusive of small businesses. Next slide. You can go to the next one. You're giving the slides out. Everybody can read it really quick. This is a dashboard. I don't believe you all can see but we can. So I wanted to share with you about entrance, re-entrance, new entrance, and recent entrance. So the government is tracking new entrants, meaning who's coming back into federal acquisition, who is getting contracts, because again, when you don't have a vendor base, that's issues with security, supplier security issues. So the OMB now tracks how many new entrants, how many recent entrants. So new entrants, I believe, are if you haven't had a contract in 5 years. Recent entrants, you haven't had a contract in 3 years. So this gives you a little information. This information is from fiscal year 23. So this shows you how many new entrants DHS had. A majority of them came from the small disadvantaged business community. Okay. So just throwing this out so you can see that that is being tracked. Now, is it in an evaluation? No, we haven't got to the point where, hey, if you're a new entrant, you get extra evaluation points. No, that's not, they haven't gone that far. But they are tracking by, how many new entrants and recent entrants for each agency. Next slide. And I think the next one shows you the dollar amounts of new entrants, the dollar value of the contracts. So while new entrants made up, 27%, large business new entrants got over $1 billion of the work. So that's the other thing. So new entrants are not just tracked small and large, small. They're new entrants, period. New, small and large business to as DHS contractors, and it's tracked for every agency. Next slide. You can go through these, Rena. I think everybody get interested in the copies of the slide, executive order. So real quickly, some of my insights. What we do, some of our best practices. If you haven't been to our vendor outreach sessions, please sign up. There's information on our website about it. We have small business specialists in each activity component, rather. The OSDBU, I help design large DHS-wide contracts with socioeconomic pieces like First Source 1 and 2. First Source 3 should be awarded soon. We did have some protests on First Source 3. PACs 1 and 2 were reserved solely for service-disabled veterans. PACs 3 now adds in women, hub zone, and 8A firms as part of PACs 3. That's for program management, administrative and clerical and technical services. We manage the forecast. Again, we participate in outreach. You can go to the next slide. We also have something called vendor outreach matchmaking events, which we won an award for. Now, what is that? Don, we already do VOS, but what's VOM? We do vendor outreach matchmaking events for specific procurements, and we also do them, like, for instance, the U.S. Coast Guard had a procurement for their new construction contracts. They wanted companies that just did construction. So we did a special event just for Coast Guard and construction companies. S&T had, they were issuing their BAA, and they had these different idea questions, and they wanted, R&D firms who had, expertise in that space. We also do these for large to small or small to small. We take the government out of them sometimes. So the vendor outreach matchmaking events are very specific to a group or to a particular procurement. We do a lot of training. You can go past that, Rena. I'm a big believer in training. If you don't know, you don't know. And you can only do better if you know. So as a contracting officer, I see a lot of gaps and holes in some of the small business training. So we do a lot of training. Actually, today we have 8A training. A lot of increasing engagement in 2025, enhanced a lot of more. I'm big on market research. I don't know how you make decisions and you have not, went to the market to see what's out there. So I'm a big proponent of using SAM, any other kind of vehicles where you can get all types of businesses. What vehicles are they on to support? A lot of transparency. I believe in industry days. I believe, again, posting in SAM, a decrease in consolidation of contracts. We don't do bundling at DHS. We don't have any bundle contracts. Do we consolidate? Yes. Not that many. Not that many. There's a process if this contract is to be consolidated with another contract. So then you, instead of 2 or 3, you have this one vehicle. So we want to kind of decrease those. We don't have a lot, so it's not a lot, but we don't do any bundling. Next slide. And we're not sure, what the rules will be moving forward. We have a new administration coming. We will support what the ideas are. We will support small business. I'll say, as a small business, you need to read and comment on any proposed rules that come out through SBA. A lot of times when they come out, if you're not voicing your concern, they're going to move with, other people's comments or what they think the rules should be. So I suggest that you make sure you do that. You will see at DHS a use of a lot of contract reserves. What is that? Well, that was a full and open competitions, but we reserve a lane for a small business team. So some of the procurements that you may have seen that were large business only, we're going away from that. Not that they wouldn't be unrestricted. The small business team needs to compete with the large businesses. However, if you know about reserves, how they work, but at least we're allowing, or we're reserving a place for a team that can compete. We weren't doing a lot of that before. So you'll see a lot more of that. A lot more outreach to underserved groups. This is just a checklist that each vendor should have. A lot of you are mature companies, know a lot of this stuff. And so maybe the last slide. And key takeaways for doing business with DHS. Just utilize us as a resource. The small business specialists and the components as a resource, because they sit with the program people. They know who these people are. Because if you come to me, I'm just going to go to them and ask the question, because I don't sit, I sit at headquarters level. And just understand the missions. It's nothing worse than wasting your time if what you want to do is not the mission of that component. So I think that's it. It's a lot of information. I'm sorry, y'all. My voice is gone. I don't know if there's any questions I can answer.
That was a lot of information, but very useful. So thank you. I think you hit the mark on covering the critical stuff. And
yeah,
there are a couple of questions.
I see someone asked about Mentor Protege. Let me answer that really quick. The Mentor Protege program launched November 1st. However, some of the application and the guide may not be the 2024 version. We have to go through. There's sometimes a lag in between what we post, what we want posted, and what public affairs will post. So the program is in effect, but if I need to check today, I didn't check if the guide and the application for 2024 are not posted. They're coming soon in a couple days. Okay. So our Mentor Protege program is back. The main difference is that historically Black colleges and universities and minority servicing institutions can be proteges. We are requiring that mentors participate in our VOS, our vendor outreach sessions, and our VOM. We are reviewing if those companies, large businesses that want to be mentors are not meeting their subcontracting goals. We're reviewing ESRS more closely than we did before. So those are some of the major changes of our Mentor Protege program. So any questions about that?
Maybe we bring you back to talk. We bring you back just to talk about the Mentor Protege.
Just to talk about Mentor Protege. I can do that. Yeah, something quick about Mentor Protege. No problem. Right.
We'll do a follow-up on that with your office. So thank you for that. And those of you who are asking for recordings and copy of the presentation, we will be sending that out. You will get a link to it. So rest assured, you'll have access to all of this. There is a question about a clearance process. Can you provide POC on contracts that require facility clearance and other clearance requirements? I don't know what they mean by can you provide POC, but just
the solicitations will indicate if a facilities clearance is required, and if and there's a process to go through that. You can be sponsored, or you can also if you win a contract, get a clearance that way. So that's a more intricate question, and there's not one stop shop for that. Yeah.
And Cindy, you have access to Ms. Bullock's office. Your email is shared, so please follow up for more
Yeah.
details. There are a couple of early questions that were submitted to us, and I'd like to go through those if we have 2 extra minutes with
Uh-huh.
you. So one of them is, would it help to submit capabilities to the liaison office, or should we come to your office first? How does it help one way or the other, coming to your office or submitting capabilities to the liaison offices?
Well, I think that it depends. Sometimes it could do both. I mean, for me, it's good for me to know who these companies are, especially when I'm out and about and they want to, just have a discussion with me. But most of the time, it makes sense to the component that they're interested in to reach out to their small business specialist, because a lot of them, like I talked about, Coast Guard, CBP, FEMA have their own way that they pull these companies in and have their own industry days. Like, for instance, FEMA will have their own industry day about certain NAICS codes. Same thing with CBP, just launched this whole system that they have to intake customer meetings. So it's a little bit of both. If you just want to have some FaceTime with me, is great. But the components really is where you should start, because that is where the program people sit, and that's where the contracting officers are, etc.
So just as a follow-up to that, the questions that just popped up, how can we connect with DHS for one-on-one meetings? What is the best way to position a company to meet with the actual buyers?
So there's different ways. So if you attend one of our vendor outreach sessions, you have an opportunity to meet with the small business specialist or large business. So large businesses also attend our event. So if you're interested in mentoring or discussing with a large business, you can do that. But reaching out to the small business specialist directly, if you go to our website, is another way to do that. Now, they kind of, will talk to companies prior to the program person talking to you. A lot of program people are small business friendly or company friendly. Some are not. I mean, I'll just tell you the truth. I mean, some want to hear your ideas, some not as much. Sometimes the point of contact is not correct because people moved on. So I say the best point of contact is the small business specialist. Now, if you've reached out to them and they're just so busy they haven't been able to contact you, or something has happened, which is rare, reach out to me and my office will help facilitate the discussion with them. But you can always include us on emails, etc. But the first stop is really the small business specialist at that component that you're interested in doing work for.
All right, a couple questions on 8A sole source or just sole
Uh-huh.
source contracts in general. Talk a little bit about how your agency is, how do they work with sole sources? Are they even still doing sole sources? And how can a company position itself for a sole source?
Yeah, so you're talking about 8A direct awards, sole source quotation. We do those all the time. There's dollar limits. So when you can compete and when you don't have to compete. Again, if you look at our forecast, everything over $250,000 is posted. If you see something that is going to be an 8A sole source, you may say, well, wait a minute, we can do that too. And so you reach out to the small business specialist, or like I said before, there's a point of contact that's also listed in our APFS. And so you can reach out to that individual too to say, hey, I'd like some FaceTime. I'm a company that can do this also. But I wouldn't give up, because oftentimes 8A awards, we have to get permission from SBA to issue the award. You have to make sure the company is eligible to receive the award. And sometimes they're not. They may have gotten too many sole sources. So you just don't know. So sometimes SBA will say, no, they're not eligible for award. So then you got to start over. But the key is to make sure that the small business specialist knows you, the program office is aware that you have these skills. Particularly, sometimes there are 8A companies that are doing, are doing a lot of the work. They know who you are. Just make sure that you're, they really know who you are, that you really are the ones that are doing a lot of the work. So yeah, we do 8A competitive awards. We do 8A sole source. We do, for ANCs and tribal groups, Native Hawaiian organizations. There's a higher dollar value for sole source. For DHS, civilian agencies, 25 million. Well, DOD is 100 million. We don't have that kind of authority to do that. So we do a little bit of everything. So no, we do still do sole source. Now, do we like competitions? Yes. So you may not see us do as many ANC direct awards because we like that to be an 8A competition. Even though they can compete, we like to see everyone be able to compete in 8A. But sometimes we do use the authorities that are a use for us to do direct awards to them.
All right, and I know we're running out of time, so I'm going to ask one last question here. And that's for those companies who don't meet or don't want to pursue contracts that don't hit the $250,000 threshold. What is your advice for companies who want to pursue those micro purchases or purchases less than 250,000?
Yeah, those I would reach out to the small business specialist because there is no DHS does not have a way that those are advertised. I'll just say my thinking. I think before, I think under the current administration, there was going to be some traction to try to um, have those advertised. I think could still be the same. I don't know, but right now a lot of those are usually with a purchase card if they're under the micro purchase threshold. If they're over between 10 and 250,000, they require it to be set aside to small businesses unless there's an exception. So what you need to do is really reach out to the small business specialist, say, hey, and get to know the contracting people. A lot of those are done under schedule. We have a reverse auction tool that we use. So it just depends. So it is hard to see those. There's no way to see what those are. So it's best to reach out to the small business specialist to
Okay, and I
see,
did say that
what
was the last
procurements are
question,
coming.
but I said it was the last question, but I'll ask you to give a closing remark as an answer to the question. How has small business disappointed you? What can they do better?
Oh, no, I think they've done a great job. Only time I get a little bothered is when we want to make sure we don't take for granted that DHS has to meet these goals. Agencies have to meet these goals. We want to make sure, like I said before, that you read the proposals you submit. Don't make small mistakes. Perform well on the contracts when you get one. Don't stop. Don't be discouraged. Sometimes it takes a while. An organization like DHS is very complicated. But I'll say I've never been disappointed. And I will say, I think I'll say one thing that does disappoint me sometimes, just to be very clear, is that there's a process within DHS that, let's say, any procurement over $2.5 million that's not going to be set aside comes through my office, right? And so sometimes I'll see a procurement that's $3-4 million, and I'm like, I know small business can do this. No one responded, or there's like 2 companies responded. You hear us talk about this RFI thing, but it's very true. And I go and scratch my head and go, what? This now, it's not that it's slated for a large, it has to be competed amongst everyone. So we want to make sure there's as many set asides as possible. So there's a lot that disappoints me sometimes. And I know I just talked to a company that can do this, I thought, but when they don't respond to posting in SAM or respond with just the capability statement, don't answer the questions, that can be a little disappointing for me. So please
Well,
make sure
hey,
you
thank you. You've been very gracious with your time staying over. I really appreciate it. Hope you feel better. I know I'm hurting your throat even more, but there's just so many questions.
yeah,
And we would love to have you back and follow up, especially on that mental
yeah.
courtesy program. So
Oh
I will
yeah.
have to follow up with you on that one.
Okay, no problem. Just let me know. Thanks for having me. I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
And
And
thank you to
hopefully
all
slides are
our
helpful.
attendees today. Thank you for taking the time to listen and join our webinars. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Take care.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Give me 3 good reasons why anyone would want to use Proposal Helper.
3 good reasons. All right. First of all, we have a full service solution from kickoff to submission. So we can handle your proposal, jump into your proposal at any point. Secondly, we offer modularized support. So a full service solution, but we can plug and play. We can fill in where you need us and meet clients where their needs are. And then third, it's a firm fixed price support so you can budget with ease and confidence.
Thank you, Kyle.